Okie dokie, everybody. Here we go. Welcome to Astro-Babble. We are here on this lovely Friday. Happy Venus Direct. Venus in Gemini is now completely direct. She is out of her retrograde in Gemini. Happy days on her day, Friday, Frigga's Day. So lots of good stuff to be had. So we are here for the Astro-Babble. We are going to talk about 8 charts that have been donated by you, the lovely followers. In these 8 charts, we'll actually be able to share them via Facebook, thanks to technology. And if you would like to, if for some reason you're tuning on Instagram and you would like to see these charts, just go to the YouTube channel where I record all of these. Just search for ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. And likewise, if you would like to be on the live stream, just go to private message me on any of the social media channels, your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need those 3 bits of information to run an accurate chart. We will add you to the list. And likewise, if you'd like to learn astrology or talk to me one-on-one via private consult, you can always go to my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Anyway, let's get to it, shall we? We're going to pop open a fizzy water. Good morning, Albert. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go ahead and look at Laura's chart. So let's see. Laura, we've got a 24-degree Virgo ascendant with Pluto and Uranus. Uranus is retrograde as well, sandwiching that 24-degree Virgo ascendant. Where is Mercury, the lord of the chart? Oh, in Cancer. That's fun. Moon is also in Cancer. So this time is actually hitting Laura kind of hard, actually, because we've got Mercury transiting retrograde through Cancer, and we just had that solar eclipse in Cancer right on Laura's Mercury. So Laura, I'm wondering first and foremost, like, how you doing? How you doing, Laura? Because that solar eclipse on the Mercury and then Mercury going retrograde conjoining your natal Mercury, like that's pretty intense in your chart. I'm not gonna lie. Mercury is that planet of the mind. Yeah, and so when we see transits to Mercury in a natal chart, we find that the mind starts to become compromised, and already having Mercury in Cancer and the Moon in Cancer as well gives Laura this double dose of this super emotional energy, which her Virgo side really tries to fight against. When we have a Virgo ascendant, but then our Moon and the Lord of the chart is in a water sign, it's Virgo likes everything to be that mutable earth energy, that idea of everything has a proper box, everything goes in a certain place. It's very mise en place. It's very Marie Kondo is the existential Virgo. Like, that's who she is. Even though she's not a Virgo, but she has that Virgo energy. And likewise, the idea of having the Moon in Cancer, very, very emotional, but having the Lord of your chart, Mercury, who's in that water sign, kind of dampening or throwing that water energy onto the ascendant, it makes things a little bit messier than I think Laura would like. So now let's talk about her sun stuff. So she's got this really interesting pileup of Venus in Gemini, Sun in Gemini, Mars in Gemini, and the MC in Gemini, all in the 10th house of success, also being ruled by her natal Mercury. So this solar eclipse really hit the professional life hard too. It's just been revelation after revelation in terms of Laura's birth chart recently. Yeah, and then Venus going direct, conjoining her natal. Girl, this is such a big time for you. Such a big time. It's a big time for everybody. Like, we're all experiencing these energies, don't get me wrong. But Laura, your chart, like, all of these planets are hitting you directly. And it's all in your 11th house of friendships and tribes, in your 10th house of success. Like, you're really, really starting to understand what type of success you would like to achieve in this life. And I think you're really starting to understand that the success that you'd really like to achieve is you finding your community and you standing up for your community's rights and being a little bit more of a spokesperson, channeling that Gemini Sun energy, but also that Mercury in Cancer in the 11th, like you standing up for your community, giving back. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if you volunteered at a food clinic. Virgo is known for her her ability to work with food and diet, and specifically, the Lord of your chart in Cancer, that sign of the stomach in the 11th house of friendships. It would, if your life's really kind of going downhill and you'd like to shift your perspective, volunteering in a soup kitchen would be absolutely excellent, or donating to a food pantry or something like that. But you've got so much of this lovely Gemini energy up in the 10th. Wouldn't surprise me as well if you worked in the field of worked in a field or had some sort of component to your success life that revolved around gender issues. Whenever we see Mercury and Mars in the same house, there tends to be this masculine-feminine component that innervates that house, and often they tend to clash, especially with your Venus and your Mars being combust the sun, a little bit too close to the sun for comfort. They're overshone by the sun, and they can't really express themselves as much. That idea of gender nonconformity being definitely a present component of your chart. What else do we want to talk about in Laura's chart? Yeah, let's talk about this 7th house of relationships. So we have the 7th house of relationships ruled by Pisces, which means that Jupiter is ruling that house, and Jupiter is over in Leo in the 12th house of hidden enemies, karmic healing, as well as retreats, hospitalizations, things of that nature. When we see the ruler of the 7th in the 12th, significant others tend to be our own worst enemy. It's a little bit of a toxic placement, I'm not going to lie. So we need to be a little bit more focused on, Laura, I know you have this bleeding heart, and I know that it's very easy for you to give that to other people, but especially when you choose to spend your life with somebody, it's also important that you as a person recognize that that person is on their healing journey, and you're here to facilitate that. We think of relationships in a couple camps, right? We think of relationships in terms of sex. We think of relationship in terms of building a life together. We think of relationship in terms of career. We think of relationship in terms of kids. We think of relationship, we can divide relationships into several different categories. But Laura, for you, when we look at this Jupiter in the 12th house ruling the 7th, I think that you need to recognize that the partners that you tend to attract really need your help on a spiritual level to really unlock some of these trickier life decisions that they've made, to really help them facilitate their own aloneness. And I think that that's a really powerful statement. So let me pull that apart like taffy real quick. So the idea of you specifically having a partner where you're here to reinforce their own healing habits. You're here to say, you know what, I really think you need to get away for a little bit. I really think that you need to push yourself spiritually. I really think that you need to dive deep into these toxic things. It would be very appropriate for you to encourage their own healing journey, because the ruler of your relationship house is in that 12th of healing. Likewise, especially early on, you might throw your hands up in the air and you're like, why do I only choose people who are broken? And just FYI, we're all broken, honey. It's not you. But it is a very significant portion of your relationship to facilitate that in others. Okay, that's it. That's all the chart has to say. So thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate you. Let's double check the comments. Yes, Laura, thank you so much. I was engaged to an alcoholic. Oh, darling, my baby. I love you. Yes, it's so true, honey. It's so true. So I'm glad that we were able to clarify that for you. And I think that you understanding that that's your role, and that's what I love about astrology. Oh, let me throw on my camera real quick because I'm looking at the comments. So that's really what we look at from an astrology perspective. Like, astrology is here to validate your experience and say, oh yeah, that is how it's been. Oh yeah, that is how it's worked out. Astrology should make sense. It's not about giving you this psychic dip into the future and giving you all of these things that you don't understand. It's about saying, yeah, that's so weird. I thought that I was the only one. And in some cases you might be the only one, but it's there in your chart. You chose this. So a lot of people who have issues with their life and issues with their chart and issues with their place, us working one-on-one and really unpacking some of these themes can bring a lot of emotional closure to say, oh, there is a method to this madness. There's a purpose for me doing this. It's something that is here to fuel my own life journey. It's not just some random thing or a mistake that I just keep making. Yeah? Okay. Let's move on to chart number 2. Thank you, Laura. That was absolutely beautiful, and I'm so glad that we were able to use your chart as a teaching experience, because chances are you needed to hear it, but there was somebody out here watching the live stream that needed to hear it too. Okay, Heather, my darling, another Virgo ascendant. Get out of town. So we have a Virgo ascendant. We also have Mercury and Mars in the same house, but it's a very different dynamic. And this is what I love, is we have two charts with similar energy, but their energy is also very different. In this chart, we have a Virgo ascendant, but we have the Sun in the first house, making this person a double Virgo. So whenever we see the ascendant, the Sun, and the Moon, the three major personality markers, in the same sign, any combination of those, we say that they're a double whatever. As an example, I'm a double Cancer because I have Sun and Moon in Cancer. Some people are triple whatever their sign is. Heather tends to be a little bit of an ultra Virgo because she has the Sun but also the ascendant in Virgo. We also have Venus and Mars in Virgo in the first house, which again, when we think of Venus and Mars in the first house, especially the first house of the body, identity, we find that there is a little bit of that questioning of gender, that idea of gender complexities being a part of this chart, bisexuality, the idea of the masculine and the feminine both coming together in the same house, especially in the body. But also, Venus doesn't really like to be in Virgo, so I think we need to, if anything, we need to work on Heather's more yin aspects, a little bit more of the feminine, especially with, the Moon in Gemini too, up in the 10th house. Like, there's so, Gemini and Mercury specifically, their planets, and even your Mercury is in Libra, the sign of balance. Get out, Heather. Get out. So cool. We have, whenever we tap into that mercurial energy, mercurial comes from Mercury, and Mercury is known traditionally as a male archetype. He's painted as a male archetype, but in earlier lore, he's actually hermaphroditic. He's actually of both sexes. He can change back between masculine and feminine. He embodies both genders, and I think that's really the classical image of Mercury that Heather is pulling through her chart, the idea of having a Moon in Gemini, Mercury sign, being ruled by Mercury in Libra, the sign of balance, having this ultra Virgo tendency in the first chart, the first house. I think that this is something that Heather will need to play with, is that idea of gender ambidexterity. Okay, let's see what else. Having the ruler of the chart in Libra in the second of finance, I really like that placement, Heather. I think that you've got an eye for money. You've got an eye for money for sure, and part of this is your Mars in Virgo in the first, ruling your 8th house of business. And I love this. Yeah. Okay, so another reason why money is so important in your chart, Heather, is because we've also got this Saturn in Cancer up in the 11th. So Cancer is one of those signs that a lot of people think, and rightfully so, we're just an emotional bag of goop that's ready to shed tears at any given moment. And that's definitely true. Cancer is a very emotional sign. But at the same time, one thing that people sleep on Cancer for is their ability to manage money. Cancer is a very hoardy sign, hoarding emotions, physical possessions of emotional value, but also hoarding money, because they want to take care of people, and they recognize that money is one of the ways that you do that. And having a Saturn in Cancer in the 11th of friendships and communities and tribes, but also that Saturn ruling the 6th house of work, health, pets, I think that the idea of Heather specifically working in the financial field, that would be an area that she would be able to use a lot of her Virgo strengths to manage the finer details. Also, this Mercury and Libra in the 2nd house of finance coming in to really use her quick and airy mind to go through the numbers and balance data. Yeah, so that's all really good stuff. But now we need to examine some of the relationship things. Some of the relationship things in the chart. So specifically, 7th house of relationships also has Pisces on the cusp, but this time we have Jupiter in Pisces in the 7th house of relationships. So Heather, the person that you're attracted to actually has this very Jupiterian energy, this very mayoral energy is a good way to say it. Somebody who tends to be, who has a very big, kind of boisterous, expressive energy of Jupiter, but also who's very soft and sensitive and emotional like Pisces. They do tend to be a little bit stubborn. They do tend to be a little bit overly indulgent because of that retrograde Jupiter energy. They plant their feet down and they're not really willing to budge as much as a Jupiter who's free and direct, which can be somewhat problematic, especially because you're all about the details, and somebody who you marry who is, or have a long-term relationship with, who's not all about the details can be healthy but also not healthy, because they're not really prone to listen to you and your rational mindset, because they work in a very irrational space. But you understanding that out of the gate is also going to be really important for you, because they have medicine for you, but also you have medicine for them. And I think your Gemini moon is a little bit more apt to empathize, especially with it being ruled by that Mercury in Libra. So I think you're in a good spot. You just need to make sure that you don't get overly bogged down by their own emotions and kind of sucked into their turmoil trap, would be a good way to say it. But this Jupiter is also doing something really interesting. Jupiter is ruling the 4th house of family and home, co-present with Neptune in Sag, and then North Node in Sag. So whenever we see the North Node in the 4th house, this is somebody who is really striving to find a home of their own, somebody who's really striving to cultivate that safe space, often because they didn't have it when they were younger. And that North Node in the 4th house, I think, being ruled by that Jupiter in Pisces, the one thing that you're going to be looking for in a partner, Heather, is somebody who can hold down the nest, somebody who can really make that fort, somebody who can really make you feel safe and encourage you to feel like your own home is sacred, and that it is a lovely space, and that it is something that you both treasure and can build together. I think that that's a very important part, not just of your partnership, but also of your journey here in this life, because the North Node really tells us where we're striving towards, what we'd like to build on, who we'd like to become, and you've chosen to put that in the 4th house of home and family. So that's an important part of your chart. Yeah, you also have a really fun tendency to adopt other people's children. That's that's also really, really cute. I like that. I like that side note to your chart, because we have this Jupiter in Cancer in the 11th house of friendships, which is ruling your 5th house of children. So the idea of, as you're socializing and as you're finding people in your community that you can actually relate with, you actually tend to adopt their children. And that's adorable. I like that. I like that little nuance of your chart, because it really does exercise a lot of your Virgo tendencies, because you're like, your mom doesn't take care of you as good as I do. And that, it's a joke and it's silly, but it's also very you. And I think that that's adorable. So yeah, we need to work on the monetary stuff. We need to engage that a little bit more in your chart, especially being well known for that. We also need to understand the dynamics about the relationships a little bit more, and I think that's really the crux of the chart for sure. Excellent. So we'll pop back onto the comments. Thank you for your messages. Laura, I appreciate it. Yes, so we are on to chart number 3. Right? Yeah, we're on 3. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, crap. We're not doing great on time. Okay, so I need to speed this up just a bit. Michaela, my darling, let's take a peek. So we have a change of pace, so we're going from Virgo into the cardinal earth sign of Capricorn. So we have a Capricorn ascendant in Michaela's chart. We also have Mercury in Capricorn and Neptune in Capricorn. So stubborn, Michaela, so stubborn. I'm a fan of it, but so stubborn. Also, we have a trend with family here, but the family dynamic is difficult. The family dynamic is very difficult. Okay, so that's where we need to begin. That's where we need to begin in the chart. So the reason why I say the family dynamic is difficult is because the ruler of the chart is in the 4th house of family. So Michaela naturally gravitates towards that space of home and family. That's where she feels most comfortable, in theory. However, we do have this slight mutual reception and, frankly, an issue here, because Saturn is in the sign of his fall. Detriment, because he's opposing his exaltation in Libra. and they are making an opposition, separating, but still in opposition, with Mars in Libra in the sign of his fall, up in the 10th, and that opposition is really tricky, and I'm not necessarily a fan of it. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Reason number one is that Michaela has chosen a detrimented Saturn as the chart ruler, which can be really difficult, especially in the first 30 years of life, before that first Saturn return as Saturn matures. It can be a very, very difficult upbringing. And Mars also as the secondary lesser malefic in a sign that he doesn't like to be in the 10th house. There's this tug of war that's really, really strong between the 4th house of family and the 10th house of success. The need to escape that, the feeling of not being comfortable, the feeling of needing to run away or get away, to kind of pole vault out of that frictionless situation, I think is something that Michaela has had to channel, that repressed anger, that repressed frustration in the family dynamic is an energy that I think is very, very present. And it's not like she doesn't know how to handle it. Like some of the toughest minds in the world have Mercury in Capricorn, and especially to put it in the 1st house. But I think it's not just mentally, emotionally difficult, it's physically difficult, especially because she's got this moon in Sagittarius co-present with Pluto in the 12th house of hidden enemies and karmic healing. I think there's this sense of Michaela needing to suppress that Sagittarius energy. You know, Sagittarius is very lighthearted. Sagittarius is very much about seeking the truth and being inspired and being flamboyant and kind of crazy and all over the place, but fun. And to hide the moon away in the 12th house while she's going through all of this family drama, there's a pattern in the chart that I would prefer not to be repeated. Yeah, so we may need to work on that. We may need to do some Saturn remediation. We may need to do some deeper work as far as that's concerned. However, when it comes to the financial stuff, we've got another pileup in the financial house. So we've got Venus in Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius, Uranus in Aquarius, and the Sun in Aquarius in the 2nd house of finance. It's quite the stellium. When in doubt, look at the numbers, is what this says to me. You know, Michaela, again, the idea of finance actually and working in the field of finance would be excellent for you as well for different reasons. First and foremost, it's something you can control. Yeah, it's something that you can predict. It's something that is black and white. It's not something that you need to guess at. It's not a game. Yeah, it's not a power play. It's something that's concise. It's written down. It's tracked. It's measured. And I think that there's a lot of safety in that space for you. So when in doubt, I would really highly suggest that you look at the numbers of your life. Use spreadsheets, use Excel, work on calendars and schedules. You know, really understand that if you're in a bad place and you find that you haven't scheduled any time for yourself, that's part of the reason. Yeah, but also if you're feeling out of sorts and you're like, you know, I've done yoga this week, I've, you know, eaten really well this week, I've made time for friends, what's missing? You know, it could be financial. It could be you looking at your bank account and saying, maybe I spent too much time with friends and we went out too many times, or I spent, you know, way too much on a home repair and that's what's getting you down, or something like that. But I think the idea of your life needing to come back into a sense of control, coming back into this sense of how things are supposed to be, because often, especially earlier in life, there was a sense of being out of control. Okay, so that's the major message in Michaela's chart. So let's just take a quick peek at the comments. Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you're enjoying the charts. Let's go to Corey. Corey, my dear. Okay, so Corey, and we switch ascendants again. This time we have a Cancer ascendant. We have a Sun in Cancer, Mercury Cancer, Mars in Cancer, all in the 1st house of the body. Whenever we see a stellium in Cancer in the 1st house, there's a hyperactivity in the stomach that needs to be kind of understood. So Corey, darling, food is really the medicine for you, especially with Mars in Cancer. That's just a recipe for acid reflux. So we just need to be very, very aware of the food situation. Also, we've got this moon in Libra conjunct Jupiter in Libra in the 4th house of family. That's really interesting. But also from a medical astrology standpoint, my ears are picking up, because kidneys and hormones are ruled by Libra, and they're also making a square to this Mars in Cancer. So that square from Mars, the sign of the stomach, to the moon and Jupiter in Libra, the sign of the kidneys. Jupiter tends to make things swollen, and kidney issues because of dietary issues are a really common thing. So I said this, I think, in the last live stream, but Corey, if you start to develop mysterious back pain that won't go away, I would highly recommend that you look at your diet and your hydration levels, because it could be kidney related. And also hormones. Sleep is another big thing that you'll notice. As your stomach starts to get out of sorts, your sleep will become more and more disturbed. Okay. So this Jupiter Libra and Moon in Libra conjunction is really interesting in the 4th house. 4th house is, again, that space of family. Libra is that sign of balance, so we find that there is a need to balance in the family. However, the Moon and Jupiter coming together make a really interesting dynamic, because Jupiter likes to make things big, right? And Jupiter likes to expand. Jupiter likes to make things boisterous. And so having the moon here as well reflects Jupiter, so it's kind of like we've got 2 Jupiters in the 4th house. So very much about the rules, very much about things being fair. Fair was the word that the house kind of revolved around growing up. But we also have this Uranus in Libra, which is interesting, because Uranus is that planet of unpredictability. So a lot of the family life was trying to control or make nice with things that were somewhat out of control. And despite it has this energy of just keep smiling, just keep swimming, everything will be fine, when it is in fact not fine. In fact, Corey, you might have felt emotionally kind of swept under the rug with family, because one of the faults of Libra in general, especially when it's in a messy dynamic like the 4th house, Libra tends to say, yes, we're going to balance everything. We're going to make sure that everything's nice and good and even. Yeah, but we're just going to ignore this bit over here because it doesn't fit onto the scales. We've got to balance. And even though this is definitely a thing, we're not going to acknowledge it because it doesn't fit into our scheme of balance. And that's something that I see a lot in the toxic Libra expression. So that could have happened in the home dynamic as well. However, you would be an excellent realtor, having the Jupiter moon ruling the 6th house of work. Also having Venus in Libra ruling that moon from the 2nd, like you working in the housing industry, working with homes as a realtor, working in banking for home loans, like you do very well in those professions for sure. Okay, what else do we want to talk about? You've certainly decided to pick a lot of grounded friends, Corey. Saturn in Taurus is probably one of the earthiest expressions that we can put into a chart. You've decided to put that in your 11th house of friendship. So friends in general are a very grounding force for you, especially with the Sun at 19 making a sextile to Saturn in Taurus. There's a really nice synastry here, really nice synastry between you and your friends. So I would highly encourage you to get a little bit more of the friendship experience. If you feel like your life is out of control, tap into the grounding force of people who don't necessarily behave in the way that you do, because they'll really be able to pull you out of your funk. Oh, and that Saturn in Taurus is ruling your 7th house of relationships. So relationships for you are start off as friendships first, and even one of your goals with relationships, even if it doesn't work out, is to stay friends. And that's not always possible, but it is something that I think really makes you very well-rounded as an individual. Something like friendship stability can really offset some of the non-acknowledgement that the parental units had and the family dynamic tends to bring up for you, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that counterbalance very much. Living abroad is also something, Corey, that I think would stimulate your chart in a very big way. This Jupiter moon in Libra is ruling this North Node MC up in the 9th of spirituality, of travel, of foreigners, of higher education. I think you would be an excellent real estate instructor, kind of taking that to the next level. But also the idea of you specifically having homes in other countries or living outside of your country of residence, especially if you decided to go on retreat or study with these spiritual traditions of a particular country, that would fuel your chart to no end. And I think that if you haven't considered traveling as a form of remediation for you specifically, I think you should. You know, as the corona stuff lifts, I think it'll be easier for you to access those things. But that North Node in Pisces ruled by Jupiter in the 4th, like you going and living a year abroad, if you have not done that, I think it would be very, very delicious for your chart to experience that for sure. Excellent. And that is Corey's chart. We'll just take a peek. Michaela, yep, I just did your chart. If you would like to submit your birth info, Jenna, just private message me your birth date, place, and time, and I will add you to the queue. That is how we do it here. Actually, this is a good stopping point because we're on chart 4. So yes, if you would like to be in the queue, just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need the exact birth time in order to run an accurate natal chart. So no abouts, no I think, no it might have been, no. Look at your birth certificate, ask your family, try to get it down to the minute, or order a copy of your birth certificate, check city records. Without that time, the form of astrology that I use, which is more traditional, I use whole sign houses as well. That ascendant is absolutely crucial for us to nail down, and the birth time is a big part of that. So that's how you get on the live streams. There is a long line, but I message you the morning of. And likewise, if you'd like to learn astrology or would like to work with me one-on-one via private consult, you can always go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. Okay, let's continue. We have Charge of the Goddess, my dear, my lovely, on Instagram. Our next 4 are actually from Instagram. It was an Instagram-heavy day for submissions. Let's take a peek. So, Charge of the Goddess. We have a Leo ascendant. That Leo ascendant is being ruled by the Sun in Gemini, co-present with Mercury in Gemini in the 11th out of combustion. Lovely. Absolutely lovely. I'm a fan. So I love seeing the ruler of the chart in the house of friendships, because it means somebody is just super personal or personable rather, and especially having the Sun in Gemini. Like Gemini tends to be, although a little bit frantic at times, and although a little bit kind of on the spectrum at times in terms of flipping from one extreme of the emotional spectrum to the other. They're also very intelligent, they're very funny, they're very witty, very wise, very curious, and I enjoy that, especially with the Sun ruling the chart from the 11th, which just makes this chart really, really sociable. And having Mercury in Gemini, the ruler of the Sun, because the Sun is in Mercury's sign, in the 11th house with it, I just think that you could talk people's ear off forever and they would never get bored. Like, I really, really like this combination right off the bat. I think it's delicious. And I think it's just a fabulous way for you to kick off the chart. Okay. That Mercury is also ruling this nice little pile-up in Virgo in the 2nd house. So we've got the North Node, we've got the Moon, we've got Mars here in the 2nd house of finance and resources. The North Node in Virgo, yeah, okay, here's the summary. So when we see the North Node in the 2nd house of finance being ruled by Mercury and Gemini up in the 11th house of friendships, one of the goals of this chart is to learn how to master the resources of others. And what I mean by that is it is the way it sounds. It's very much about, from a financial perspective, learning to lean on your friend's money, learning to lean on your society's value, learning to co-op, to share, to produce things that are of value for the tribe, and also be compensated for those things. I think you would do excellent if you worked in in a philanthropic way. I think you would do very well to start a charity. I think you would do very well to have a subscription or a community-based business model. I think this would be absolutely flawless for you. This is one of the charts that would be very good for MLMs, multi-level marketing, because of the sociability component, and that sociability component connected to the second house of finance. The moon in Virgo in the second house, I really enjoy that because it's an emotional understanding of money. And then Mars in Virgo as well. You know, Mars's heat is tempered by Virgo, and I enjoy that space very much. You know, we think of Mars in Virgo here as the god of the grain, you know, the farmer archetype, and I think having that in the second house of finance is absolutely flawless. It's an excellent placement for people who know how to work hard, and I enjoy that. And that Mars is also ruling Saturn in Aries up in the 9th with the MC of spirituality, so there's a good connection between the financial resources and the spiritual world. So again, like you working from the spiritual place that you are on Instagram, I think, you know, having that as a platform to discuss, to lead, to charge, you know, charge of the goddess, that very Saturn in Aries placement of charging forward. However, you know, Saturn is traditionally in detriment in Aries, so there is this idea that, you know, Saturn in Aries in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality, there is a little bit of a uncertainty here. There is a, you know, Saturn likes to hold back and Aries likes to charge forward, so there's this analysis paralysis that tends to come forward. I think it's overcome by the other placements in your chart, especially with all this Gemini. Like you're able to mentally kind of weasel your way around your own excuses, but it is something that we need to kind of understand and work on, is that idea of, you know, for every step that you would take forward, there are 50 reasons why you shouldn't, that kind of pop into the mental space. Relationships are interesting in this chart. We've got Jupiter in Aquarius, Uranus in Aquarius, both retrograde in the 7th. Not really a super fan of that. Oh yeah, Jupiter is making an exact sextile to the MC, which is fun. I think that if there was... Oh, I see what's happening here. So I think that you would do very well having a relationship that's long distance, or having a relationship with somebody who's foreign to your own culture. Having that cultural exposure, I think, would really make things exciting. Relationship-wise, I think it would also be very good for you. It would be very mentally stimulating. It would be very emotionally stimulating. And having that Uranus component of that changeability, that upset, you know, somebody who's the term was used on me a couple days ago, chaotic good. You know, somebody who has that embrace of things needing to be spontaneous and fun and all over the place, but in a good and well-intentioned way. But your relationship dynamic by no means is supposed to be stable or predictable, would be a good way to say that. Instead, there is this element of craziness, of quirkiness, of slight insanity, which does very well for your chart, I think, because you have such a strong air influence, and you have the counterbalances, like with this moon in Virgo, to keep the rational side of the equation present. I think you deserve somebody who's supposed to interest you, who's supposed to shake you up, who's supposed to take you around the world and kind of force you to go outside of your comfort zone. I appreciate that. What else? We have this Venus in Cancer in the 12th, which is interesting. We could talk about that a little bit more on one-on-one. But that Octomom energy that Venus would carry, being ruled by the Sun in the 2nd, I think that we do need to understand that kind of overspending due to your bleeding heart is something that may need to be remediated or addressed, because that Venus being in the 12th of hidden enemies, ruled by the moon in the second, really does tell us that the overly compassionate side to yourself really does tend to trip you up, because it's in conflict with some of your other values of keeping things light and airy. The minute those emotions start to bog you down, it's like you're wet cardboard and you can't really build anything out of that. So we need to make sure that that Venus in Cancer doesn't drag down the rest of your chart, for sure. Excellent. Another chart down. Jenna, yeah, so I could not care less about the placements, and this is what's really interesting from an astro standpoint is, I have this list and I have all these charts, and then sometimes people will jump on and they'll say, well, my sun is in Libra, what does that mean? Or, I have this ascendant and it's square this, and I'm like, I really don't care, because in order to get the big picture, I need the whole chart. We're looking at a very complex individual, and although we can simplify it saying, my sun is in this, moon is in this, ascendant is in this, my moon is doing whatever to this planet, I don't care until I see the whole picture. I need the tapestry to really see what's going on here. So Charge Up the Goddess, thank you so much for donating your chart to science. Let's take a look at Zane, shall we? Zane. So Zane, we have Scorpio Ascendant. Woo! North Node Scorpio, fun. Oh, not so fun. Not so fun. Why is it not so fun, you ask? Well, let me tell you. So we have a Scorpio Ascendant, but that Scorpio Ascendant is making an exact square to the ruler of the chart, which is this Mars in Leo retrograde up in the 10th house of success. Putting the ruler in the 10th house normally means somebody is very attracted to attention, somebody who feels like success is their birthright, somebody who's very driven, somebody who's very passionate, somebody who's really trying to succeed and make their mark on the world. However, having Mars in Leo retrograde, squaring the ascendant, really does provide a sense of personality conflict in the chart, especially with Scorpio being a sign that prefers to be withdrawn, prefers to be hidden, prefers to be not seen. And then Mars in Leo up here, a very flamboyant Mars retrograde, is saying, no, but give me the attention. Give it to me. All of it. I needs is it. And that's quite the conundrum. And I think that with this chart, especially putting the North Node in Scorpio in the first, there is this idea of needing to develop a strong sense of personality. So although retreating might be the default, especially to protect this very sensitive moon in Cancer in the 9th of spirituality, there is this conflict on a personality level that needs to be understood before the heart can be appropriately protected, is a good way to say it. We can't protect the heart unless we sort out how the heart is expressed via the personality. What else? So we've got Venus in Capricorn, Neptune in Capricorn, and then we've got this Jupiter in Capricorn in the 3rd opposing the moon in the 9th. Not necessarily a fan of that. Oh, you know what, honey? This is how we work around this. This is how we work around this. You've got Saturn and Pisces in the 5th house of creativity, which normally is a very repressed creativity. But once you hit 30, and that Saturn matures, you're going to realize how creative you actually are. And I enjoy that bit about you. In fact, there is a call in your chart to sell your art for money. Yeah. And I think that you using art, painting, sculpture, especially anything to do with water, so like paints, liquids, things that are very Piscean, that mutable water energy, I think that's going to really be where you break through some of these conflicts, is through artistic expression. Whenever we see Saturn in the chart, wherever Saturn is placed, that is often the hidden talent of the chart. And I think that that's very much it's very much like the obstacle is the way. Like what you naturally recoil from in early life is actually what you should be doing. And the things that make you self-conscious, often as you evolve and as you grow and as you ripen and as the chart evolves and you evolve, you start to really understand, like, oh crap, this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing, because it doesn't matter what people think. It's actually me expressing my authentic talents, and not everybody will appreciate it, but that's okay. Right? So that's definitely the thing. And it's difficult, especially with a Mercury and Aquarius retrograde in the 4th. Like, family never really understood you, miscommunications in that department, like, really, really a lot. But at the same time, I think that for you personally, one of the ways that we get around some of these miscommunications in your chart, both internally and externally, is through the mediumship of creative expression. And I think that that's really, like you said in the comments, like that is the path. Money will never really be a problem. You've got Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is probably one of the most financially beneficial aspects that we could ask for in a chart. Jupiter is the greater benefic. He is in his home sign in Sagittarius, making the 2nd house of finance very rich, very royal, very regal. And you also have Pluto in Sag here, so there will be a second wave of financial wealth that will hit you after 50, which I'm excited to see that flourish. But I do think we need to understand that, although there is a connection between you and your art, I think that there is also this idea of you working through your personal issues via the art, and you'll find that the money will come the more you're creative, as opposed to you working hard. Yeah. So it's not about turning it into a business. It's not about you making all of these prints and turning it into this this mill, would be a good way to say it. No, in fact, life wants and spirit wants and the universe wants from you to work through your self-consciousness, to work through this idea of the 10th house of success being both what you need and what you fear, and then creating a practice which happens to be financially beneficial around the artistic expression of your experience. So yes, and you do have Venus in Capricorn, so eventually you'll learn how to teach and how to communicate and how to pass on your knowledge to the world. But that's level 10 stuff. Like we're on level 2-3 right now. We just need to make sure that everything is nice, everything is kind, everything is easy, and that we get through the basics before we jump into some of the higher elements of the chart. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Zane. I appreciate you very, very much. Okay, let's go to our next chart. Our next chart is going to be Fire Dreaming from Instagram. Let's take a peek at Fire Dreaming's chart. And yes, by the way, if you would prefer not to be named on the charts, you can always give me a letter or something. But I need a name to put on the chart. So yeah, okay. Where are we at? Fire Dreaming. Okay, honey. Okay. Okay, I see you. So, we have some things that need to be talked about right off the bat, and they're not necessarily super pleasant things. So let's get those out of the way before we talk about the fun stuff like this Sagittarius moon and this lovely, lovely Jupiter in Pisces in the 11th. Friendships, gotta love it. However, we do have a Taurus ascendant, and the ruler of the chart is then Venus. Venus is in Scorpio, the sign of her fall, and she is retrograde in the 7th house of relationships. So when we look at that in a chart, we need to be highly aware from a metaphysical perspective that relationships will be slightly inherently difficult. Relationships will also be the greatest teacher in this chart. They will not come easy, especially because of Venus. Let me paint a picture for you when it comes to a Venus in detriment. Venus in Scorpio can be thought of as the exiled princess. the princess who was thrown out of her kingdom and has to kind of live in the woods as a wild woman. And she both resents the throne, but also identifies with the throne. And that identity crisis is very much what the Venus in Scorpio retrograde feels like in a chart. And this Fire Dreaming has decided to put this planet in the 7th house of relationships. And so that's where we find this crisis. That's where we find this exile, is in the 7th house. And also the sun is here. So there's an extreme identification with relationships. Very, very relationship-centric, this chart, which does not necessarily work in their favor. Neptune is also here in Scorpio, which is a very watery, muddy, mysterious placement that shrouds all of this in a haze that I think is not necessarily super beneficial. It's not necessarily super kind to the owner of this chart. So we would definitely need to do some Venus remediation. We would definitely need to work with Scorpio on a subconscious kind of shamanic level. We would definitely need to delve into the harsher aspects of this 7th house to work with relationships in a way where intimacy can be accurately expressed. Secrets are no longer part of that experience, but secrets and pain are still honored, and boundaries very important. Also learning how to end a relationship before it sours. All of these things that a 7th house in detriment would really need to pack on life lesson wise. We need to explore that in this chart. Okay. However, let's move to some of the fun stuff. So this chart, what I love about this chart is that we have some fun. We have some fun in the chart because we have this Mercury in Libra in the 6th, and in the workplace, this chart really just excels. Not only do we have this Mercury in Libra in the 6th, but we also have a very strongly placed Saturn in Aquarius up in the 10th house of success. So the idea of work and success can be an escape. It can really be this idea of let me just go out and do my job and leave everything on the home front and not necessarily worry about it for 2 seconds. I think that that's a really therapeutic tool. The idea of throwing oneself into one's work would be an excellent remediation for this chart, but we just need to make sure, just like with anything else, not to do it too often that it becomes escapism. Because especially with this moon in Sagittarius, moon in Sag really does enjoy a good party, really does like to shake things up, really does like to have fun. But at the same time, a moon in Sag can also be prone to escapism. So can a sun in Scorpio. But this Jupiter in Libra, I think, is the saving grace of the chart. I think that this is the best planet of the chart, which we would technically consider Saturn, but Saturn is co-present with the South Node, which is kind of the energy suck of the chart. Too much success, not good for this chart either. But we have this lovely Jupiter in Pisces, this very wet, abundant, very amicable, very generous, very loving, and very just very healing Jupiter, I think, in the 11th house of friendships. And I think after all of the chaos and the Scorpio-ness of the 7th house, retreating into friendships is also something that this chart would really, really need. So I think that a solid base of friends, absolutely essential for this chart. A no drama, like a absolute zero drama job, very, very important for this chart, so that once the social life as medicine has kind of formulated, and then we also have this idea of work being a safe space and work being like a no-nonsense zone, then we can start to make space for the deeper aspects of the Scorpio nonsense that's happening in the 7th house. We also have Mars and Leo with the North Node in the 4th. I think, you understanding that there will always be a certain level of drama in the family relationship. There will always be a certain level of antagonism in the family relationship. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Yeah, drama can be fun. Drama keeps things interesting. But there is a difference between drama for drama's sake and actually the drama of a situation preventing emotional connection and forgiveness and rapport. which is why I think friendships are so important. As you work on the intimate relationships in your chart, which is really where the hard stuff is, we really need to understand that you've put a lot of ease in some of your other chart placements, and you can lean on those spaces when life seems a little bit difficult. And when in doubt, with this Pluto and Uranus in the 5th house of creativity, when life gets really, really difficult, I think it would be appropriate for you to go into organization mode. I think it would be really appropriate for you to clean your home in order to clean up the energy of your life. I think that would be an excellent way to use this Uranus Virgo. Purge things, take things to donation, like physically purge in order to internally purge. And I think that clarity that Virgo brings in the 5th house of creativity would also be of great use to you when things get a little bit heady. Okay, so that's that chart. We've got one more. Let's see how we're doing on time. Yep, and we just about gotta wrap it up. Got 5 minutes left. So we've got this last chart. Let's talk about Riyadh. Okay. Cancer ascendant, right off the bat, very sensitive. Anytime that we have Cancer on the ascendant, there is this hyper-emotionality, this very protective tendency to the chart. Thank you. I'm so glad that you enjoy the readings. Yes, I enjoy doing them. But yeah, so this chart really, when we look at the moon in Leo ruling the 2nd house, as well as co-present with Venus in Leo in the 2nd house, there's a lot of flamboyance in the 2nd house of wealth and relationships. Putting the moon here in the 2nd house makes Riyadh very sensitive to things like money, time, and energy. Venus in Leo is a little bit more of a flamboyant placement to have here. She is very much about the extravagant financial spending. Also the idea of emotionally spending money, period, because the moon is here. That's also something to just be aware of, is that, it's not great financial placements, and they tend to be prone to the lavish lifestyle, if you get what I mean. So getting somebody with a better grip on the financial aspect might be helpful. Also setting spending limits for yourself so that this Venus doesn't get out of control. Trust me, my Venus altar, she is asking me to buy things for her left and right. It's just a thing. Okay. We also have this Sun in Virgo in the 3rd, ruled by a Mercury in Libra in the 4th, South Node, Virgo. And then we have this North Node, Pisces. Where is Jupiter? Jupiter's in Gemini in the 11th. How do we pull all this together? Oh, and a Mars Aries retrograde in the 10th. That's crazy. You're about to get really fun stuff happening in your success house, Riyadh. I'm very, very excited to see how this Mars transit lights up your chart, for sure. So you've got all these fire placements in your financial house, which Mars will go into Aries tomorrow, and will stay there for a good 6 months. And having Mars in his home sign of Aries conjoining your natal Mars, lighting up all your financial and work placements, I think you're going to be cooking with gas pretty soon. But one of the things that I think needs to be addressed a little bit in your chart is this idea of you using some of your softer emotional skills to actually teach, and potentially to investigate a career in healthcare. We've got this Sun in Virgo in the 3rd of writing, teaching, communication. You have a natural presence to teach. You have a natural voice. You're able to make people feel at home. Like there are some really good qualities from a teaching perspective that I think you could make use of, especially at a higher college level. But this North Node in the 9th, it really does speak towards your investigation of spirituality, your investigation of travel, foreigners, higher education. But from a Jupiter in Gemini perspective in the 12th, you're here to really learn how to take care of other people through knowledge and education. It's a very big part of your life. It's a very big part of who you are. And often, why give somebody something to wear when you can put a book in their hands? That's very much the higher expression of your chart. And having Jupiter ruling the 6th house of work from the 12th house of hospitalizations, of healing, is a really good indicator that you would do very well in the caring fields, not just because you have a Cancer ascendant, but also because of this Jupiter connected to your 9th house of higher learning and your 6th house of work. We do need to be a little bit concerned with health issues, because we have Saturn in Sagittarius and Uranus in Sagittarius in the 6th. I'm sorry for everybody on Instagram. I just got the 30-second warning, so I'm going to probably tune out before I finish the read, so catch up on Facebook or YouTube. But the idea of the liver, the hips, the blood vessels being a little bit weaker, a little bit more unpredictable from a medical astrology standpoint, that's going to be part of the chart makeup that we need to be a little bit careful with. Just a little bit careful with. I think one of the ways that you fight that is with diet and cardiovascular activity. Having the ascendant in Cancer, the sign of the stomach, the sun in Virgo, the sign of the small intestines, and then the moon in Leo, the sign of the heart. The idea of you needing to have an active cardiovascular regimen, but also making sure that diet is used to counterbalance some of the weakness in the liver, weakness in the vessels, weaknesses in the hips. That's how we would remediate that astrologically, for sure. Yeah, this is a very, although the moon in Leo does give a certain level of grandioseness, this is a very humble chart. And I think that if you're able to channel all of these energies that you've spread so widely across the chart into something that allows you to truly feel a sense of fulfillment over time, especially with helping people, and investigating some kind of deeper health trends that incorporate your knowledge, your kind of thirst for specialty, and also your caring, bleeding heart with the Cancer ascendant. I think that's really where your chart shines, because it incorporates detail with your sun in Virgo. It incorporates the healing element. It incorporates the higher learning, and you're really seeking to make an impact. That Mars in Aries retrograde in the 10th of success. I think that's the smartest move for you. It also wouldn't surprise me if you specialize very heavily from a medical perspective in the fields of cancer or reproductive medicine, colon stuff, sinus stuff. We've got this Pluto in Scorpio in the 5th house, making an exact trine, or being ruled by this this 10-degree Mars in Aries. So I think that's rather interesting. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much about it. I think the chart's going cold for me at this point. But thank you. Yes, so that is it, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for joining me for another round of the Astro-Babble. I'm so glad that we spent this time together and that you've enjoyed it. If you would like to be a part of the live stream, just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I will add you to the queue. Likewise, if you would like to work with me one-on-one or learn astrology, just go to scorpiorisingastrology.com, which is my website, and I will be happy to book a consult or teach you what I know. And yeah, until next time, we'll pick this back up on Monday, and may the stars be ever in your favor.